Another horse that has really kind of gotten a little bit of short conversation in the last couple of weeks is Circular Key. Obviously, he is coming out of the Kentucky Derby. It was a little bit of a late change for this horse. Todd Pletcher made a bit of a change to his schedule prior to the Kentucky Derby, gave him 8 weeks off, brought him back in the Derby, and got a little bit of a dull performance out of him. In fact, one of his lesser performances career-wise. Now it's time to figure out if this audible, once again, is going to be the right move for Circular Key, if he's going to move forward off of the Kentucky Derby. And Tom, we'll return to your end of the table. Any particular opinion about Circular Key and his conditioning in the Derby, and again, whether or not that will set him forward to move up in the Preakness?
I felt that Circular Key was a Derby pretender, and while I think he'll benefit from the fact that the field is shorter and, excuse me, and the pace will be surely contested, I'm still somewhat negative on Circular Key. I won't be surprised if he wins. Certainly, he is going to be a fresh horse. He does have some reasonable figures and does have some upside. So if folks are looking for some value, perhaps at 3-to-1, 4-to-1, if you can get that, he might be interesting. But I'm still thinking of Circular Key as a horse who's going to be running late and too late. He walks out of the gate. He's going to be significantly behind Street Sense and the rest of the field. And closers, I don't care what the grade of a company. Horses who come from the back need a very hot pace. He may get that, but they need to have a class edge as well, and I'm not so sure this one is proven he's got the class edge.
Anthony?
I like him because I think he is going to get a pace scenario that he will enjoy. I think he is a major part of this mix. I talked about the fact that I thought his preparatory schedule was 1.5 races. That wasn't enough. The 8-week layoff didn't help. I am not big into the excuses after horse races because we've all heard the 3 or 4 biggest ones. Track was cuppy. He didn't take to the track. He was spinning his wheels. I don't really like to listen to it. I know that when Johnny V tried to put him into a drive, he didn't get very much response. Now, if I'm benefited by the fact that it was Churchill Downs, well, good for me. But what I'd rather be benefited by the fact that this horse is finally, racing on the racetrack, which is something I know I enjoyed as a horse racing fan. And at the end of the day, he didn't run that awful. I mean, I had him in the 3rd and 4th spot. I thought that was the best he could do based on his preparatory work. I thought he was the 2nd best Todd Pletcher horse behind any given Saturday, and he gave me the type of performance that I expected in the Kentucky Derby, and now I think I'm going to get a slightly better one. Tom talked about the pace factor in this Preakness Stakes. I think I'm going to get it. I do agree he doesn't have a class edge on this group, but sometimes the deceleration of the early speed type horses is just so pronounced that you just have to do your job, because one of the horses that I think will garner a lot of attention, and I don't know if anyone else agrees, there's a concern here that hard spun hasn't worked since the Kentucky Derby.
It's a question.
I mean, who ever heard of this? I mean, we're old enough to remember no one would ever do that after a gut-wrenching performance like that. Bounce back.
Barbara only worked 2 furlongs before
the Preakness Stakes. I mean, I know the game has changed so much, but my thing with the different type of race scenarios, when a horse is on the front end and puts out what I think is what I think when all is said and done for hardspun, we saw his career best effort. And now I'm just wondering, can he pick his head up? Is the guy just darn exhausted because he ran brilliantly in the lane's end? I just don't know how much he has. And he's going to get a dramatically different race. I think the horse who was the most important horse in the Kentucky Derby was Stormello, who chose not to engage hard spun, and I think that made Mario Pino's decision very easy. If Stormello had gone after him, I think it would have been dramatically different. Well, I think hard spun is going to have company on the front end. The other side of the coin is I do think hard spun could sit 2nd or 3rd and get his most favorite preferred trip.
Seth, any particular opinion on Circular Key?
I agree with Anthony. I like Circular Key in here. I think he'll be a little tighter off of that Derby, which was, of course, off of a very long layoff from the Louisiana Derby. You always have to wonder when a trainer like Todd Pletcher comes in. He's so well planned out. When he makes an audible call like this, a little bit of a question mark. But I think if you look at this field, and if you play this field out a year down the road, who would you say are the horses that are most likely to be up in a Grade 1 company and doing well? I think Circular Key would be one of those. This is already a Grade 1 winner, as opposed to, you look at a horse like Exchanger, who I think is interesting in this race, but I'm looking at his career down the road, and I'm not quite seeing him on the same par with Circular Key. So I think Circular Key may have a little bit of a class advantage on some of the new shooters in here, and I do think he's going to be a little bit tighter coming off of the Derby.
And Anthony, as you often do, you have led into my very next question. We're going to talk a little bit next about that pace scenario that we're anticipating. And I think it's fair to say that with Stormello taking back off of the pace and a couple of other horses really offering only mild pace pressure, that Hardspun may have had all his own way, even unexpectedly. He does also have a bit of a stalking gear, and a couple of the new shooters in this field are known for having fairly good speed. Exchanger is coming off a front-end victory at Pimlico. He's the only horse in the field, by the way, with a race at Pimlico. And also, Flying First Class coming out of the Derby trial, a horse who Wayne Lucas has indicated will probably be taking it to them in the early going. Why don't we start with you, Seth? What do you see as the pace scenario in this field?
Well, the draw, obviously, for the Kentucky Derby is always a concern for folks because you have 20 horses, so the post positions become a real factor. In a 9-horse field, not so much of a factor, but if any horse in here had perhaps some strategy dictated to him by the post position draw, I think it is Exchanger coming from the 2-hole. Last time out in the Tessio, if folks haven't seen that race, you can probably look it up on the internet. Very impressive. Nice horse in there called Etude, who Exchanger beat pretty handily in that race. So I think that was a nice race from Exchanger. It was on the front end, but if you look at the past performances, Exchanger doesn't have to be on the front end. But again, I think the post position might have dictated some strategy to him. I think he'll probably have to go, being down near the inside on Saturday. So I'm going to look for Exchanger to be out there. For Flying First Class, as you mentioned, Gene, Wayne Lucas has indicated at the post position draw on ESPN, his interview was that Flying First Class would be forwardly placed, so I expect him to be out there. And the Moss Pace figures are now being printed in the Racing Form. If you look up on the Racing Form site, they have the free Preakness past performances in basic form or with the Moss Pace figures, which I'm just kind of examining now, but I was looking at the Moss Pace figures last night, and it looks like Hardspun actually may have a little bit of an early edge according to those pace figures, even over Exchanger or Flying First Class. So it'll be interesting to see, but I expect a hot pace, and I would look for those three to be out there leading the pack.
Well, for me, I think there is a subtle difference in the post position draw. I think if Flying First Class had drawn outside of Hardspun, that would have been to Hardspun's detriment. I think the outside horses, very often, I mean, if you watch the replay of the Kentucky Derby, you can see where Stormello is being asked not to engage Hardspun, and it's a big reaction when you're on the outside. I think Flying First Class with Lucas, who I don't think has any chance here, and I think is going to be on the front end, forwardly placed, is I think mildly put the way Flying First Class is going to do it. And in this case, Pino, who's going to be outside, will be like, I don't really have to get involved with that, and that helps Hardspun. I think sometimes Exchanger draws inside in here, and Seth, I agree with you completely. I think it sort of dictates for Ramon Dominguez that I'm going to go. And also the other thing is if when you're on outside type horses, I don't mean outside posters, I mean outsiders, I think you have to think, how could I possibly win this race? And I think Ramon Dominguez is saying, I can probably only win this race one way. I don't want to be the type of horse with a curling. Can I outdo what he does? I probably don't want to be outperforming Circular Key in what he does. How I can win is the way I won the Federico Tessio, the local prep race. You know what? I'm going to try and do this again. It doesn't work very often. I think Deputed Testimony was the last guy to do this, and it was in the slop of the Preakness. I think Exchanger has to go to have a chance to win. If their idea is we want to win this race, or they want to get a small piece of the pie, and those are two dramatically different ideas, I think Exchanger goes. I think Hardspun drew very well by having Flying First Class on the inside of him. Mark Guidry will not be able to dictate to Pino the early speed. I am intrigued to see how much King of the Roxy will be a pusher, I think, and the pushers that I like are the ones that after the opening battle under the line the first time, they kind of ensure that we're not going to be taking a breather here for a quarter of a mile. They're like, you got to stay on the horse. I want 5 furlongs run very quickly. I think it's going to be Flying First Class and Exchanger and hopefully King of the Roxy pushing them through basically the first half of the Preakness.